Hi, I'm Leo Brunick. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Cloudera. Thank you for coming to this session. Everybody talks about AI, right? You have to end every sentence with the word AI, I think. But we're going to show you something today that some really smart people did to actually help people that are doing good out there. To me, it's pretty inspirational. So I'm going to introduce the two smart people, my two Als. That's Alicia and Alistair. Alicia, come on up. Alicia's with MercyCORE. And Alistair is with the Cloudera. Two brilliant people who helped bring this solution to life. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves more fully. So.
We're going through.
All right, so that says walk-on slide. I think we're already here. All right. Honestly, thanks. I mean, I've had the chance to see what's been done on this project, and it's inspirational. So, Alicia, why don't you introduce yourself more fully?
Yeah, my name is Alicia Morrison, and I'm the Senior Director for Technology for Development at MercyCORE. So MercyCORE is a global nonprofit humanitarian organization, and our mission is to alleviate suffering, poverty, and oppression by helping people build secure, just, and productive communities. So we work in 35 plus countries around the world. We have more than 4,000 team members. Most of those team members are from the countries in which they live and work, because we do have a really strong commitment to localization for aid and development. So MercyCORE has a specific value proposition amongst international NGOs, and that's called crisis analysis. And what crisis analysis is really sort of a team of people in a particular country that wants to support better humanitarian outcomes by providing high-level analyses, often qualitative, sometimes quantitative, often a combination of both of those things, and providing products to humanitarian decision makers to help them decide when and where to apply humanitarian aid or development resources, whatever the case is. So they can do a number of different types of products, things like context monitoring, so looking at things like politics, conflict, what's happening in the country, but also different humanitarian themes like what's going on with agriculture. Can we glean some information about how agricultural production is going this year by looking at things like satellite data? We also look at data products, so again, sort of geospatial analytics, as well as analytics on things like conflict information, try to draw out patterns, try to do analysis with social media, and really kind of just try to provide as much information as possible to the humanitarian community writ large in a particular country, and make sure they have all the information that they need in order to make critical decisions on the ground. And this is particularly important in contexts that are very fast-moving, changing very rapidly. It's something like 80% of humanitarian decision makers say that data silos impact their ability to make decisions on a regular basis. And so they try to bring a lot of that information together in order to provide insights that will drive humanitarian decision making.
I think you guys could tell from that description what a great use case this is going to be for AI.
It's brilliant.
And Al, why don't you introduce yourself more fully?
Hi, yeah. So I'm Al. I'm a director of one of our professional services teams based in Northern Europe. And I should kind of say, actually, I'm a bit of the B team here today because the person that should be sitting here, Rob, who's in my team, who's really the clever guy. I'm not the clever guy. He's been working on this project with Alicia. In fact, he's been working with Alicia and her team now for a couple of years, or at least well over a year and a half, I think, actually. He was due to be here to talk about the solution that he's kind of designed and built, but unfortunately, a few days ago, his son was born somewhat prematurely and somewhat surprisingly, only 27 weeks, but he's doing well, so I had to drop in his place. So, yeah, but it's great to be here, and I've worked with Alicia and her teams as well for a good year or so now, and it's a real pleasure to work with them. And we've had a great relationship with MercyCORE now for quite some time, which I think's quite a good fit, really, Alicia, isn't it? Because, I mean, Alicia here has got some amazing, innovative ideas, are really stretching the boundaries of what humanitarian organizations can do with AI, and obviously at Cloudera we are sort of innovating in that space as well, and I think we kind of hit it off pretty well, and it's been an enjoyable partnership. So it's been great to be part of that.
Why don't you take us through the history of the project?
Yeah, so back in July 24, there was a Tech to the Rescue, an organization that kind of did a sort of speed dating type process to match up tech companies with organizations like MercyCORE. And as Rob would always say, he said we had a few okay dates, but then we had a really good one with MercyCORE. And so this time last year, Rob and Alicia were here talking about a Gen AI solution, which also used RAG to kind of help do general MercyCORE internal people to sort of do general research on using natural language interfaces, so sort of classic Gen AI type project. And then Alicia sort of started thinking, okay, what's next? And obviously, I think like many people, sort of there was the Gen AI phase, and people are now moving on to the agentic AI phase. So Alicia came to us with a series of kind of problem statements. I think they were about 250 words each, weren't they? I think you had about 4 or 5 ideas. Like, these are things that we reckon might be a good fit for agentic AI. And one of them stood out, which was the story that we're going to talk about today around crisis analysis. Now, in parallel to that, I run an initiative with the London Business School and some of their Masters in International Management students. So they come and do a project with us every year. And it's great because you get 2 teams of 6 very, very smart, intelligent people who've got 13 weeks to do some work for you. And so I went to Alicia and said, how do you fancy having 2 teams of smart students doing some work for you? She was like, bring it on. So we asked them to look at 2 things, and we'll talk about these in a bit more as we go through the deck. But we asked one team to look at, to take Alicia's 250-word sort of problem statement and turn it into a series of user stories. So they sat down with the crisis analysis teams and tried to understand a bit more about how those teams work. And then we also thought, well, if MercyCORE was doing this kind of for real, as it were, without the support of AWS and Cloudera, what would the business case look like? Because the process, the solution that we're providing saves a lot of time. So let's monetize that. Let's make sure we really understand the business case behind this solution. So they did a great job, and you can see there, they presented all of that to us. One thing I'll say, if you get to my age, don't ever have your photograph taken with 12 really young, bright, intelligent young master's students, because if you really want to make yourself feel depressed, that's the way to do it, trust me. But it was a great piece of work, and I think you got a lot of value from that. And then, of course, out the back of that, we had the user stories for the solution that we're building, and we're here today now to talk about it to you guys.
So you mentioned this use case and why you thought it would be ideal. Tell us about the use case.
Yeah, so crisis analysis, as we mentioned, develops a number of products. And those products can be on a monthly basis, they can be on a quarterly basis, they can be a page long, they can be many, many pages long. But by and large, what takes time is developing the information base for those reports, right? And I think we surveyed 6 different countries, 6 different crisis analysis teams across 6 different countries, and it was something like 790 hours are spent each month on research alone. And so the objective was really kind of like to come from this position of, can we reduce that amount of time spent on research alone? And I think London Business School was pretty ambitious, and so can we reduce it by 50%? And what would that look like if we were able to do that? So it's really kind of that acceleration. The humanitarian sector has undergone a drastic financial transition this year. And MercyCORE has been pretty heavily impacted by that transition. Yep. And so the question isn't how we do more with less, but if we're not going to have funding, what can we do with the people that we have? How can we best leverage their talents? A lot of times as funding gets cut, sort of analysis is the first thing that goes, right? And so now you end up with data silos, you're making decisions with very little information in places where, again, like information is really critical. And so the question is really, how do we maintain if we're not getting any new funding moving forward? And that was really kind of like the basis for our user stories.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. I was struck by the timing, right? I mean, we started talking 2 years ago, started working a year ago, and we're demoing it tomorrow, and now suddenly it's essential just to keep doing the job.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's one of these things where you can't be behind the power curve right now with AI because there's so much promise,
right.
you know. And again, kind of thinking about the benefit we got out of that LBS study, the London Business School work, is ultimately what that enabled us to do is really run those different financial scenarios, right? And so I work for the chief financial officer. It's really important to know what we're spending our money on and how that's going to ultimately sort of save us dollars in the long run, because there's not a lot to go around.
Cool. All right.
Cool.
This away.
Yeah, and obviously, so when we took the use case and we started to think about how this was going to be developed as a technical solution. You heard earlier that Alicia talked about different themes. So the analysts work very much, looking at all these different themes. So the agentic bit was really around, let's make the agents behind this solution domain experts in each of their themes. So, and there's different themes, aren't there? So I think there's humanitarian themes, which I think are things like sort of water security, food security. So things that obviously affect people's humanitarian situation. And then there's what they call contextual themes, which I think things like conflict and the political situation. And I think you were saying earlier, Alicia, that when the agents have been using sort of things like ChatGPT and the analysts have been using things like ChatGPT, they don't really get the results back that they're looking for. So the idea of using an agentic solution was, we can make each of the agentic workflows a domain expert. So one agentic workflow will be an expert in food security, and it will prioritize data sources related to food security over its kind of, the LLM won't be going to its kind of core knowledge base first. It'll be going to a much more specialized knowledge base. And obviously over time, we can build up the expertise in each of those agentic workflows so they can get better and better based on what we learn as we go through the process. So it all sits just on a kind of platform level within Cloudera's AI solution. And it's sort of running on AWS, obviously, on our PaaS platform in the cloud, and it reaches out to, or it will reach out to Bedrock to use the Bedrock capabilities there as well. But I mentioned our Agent Studio offering. Leo, you're our CPO. You're probably better placed to talk about it than I am.
I've heard of it. So everybody understands the context, right? It suddenly, I put that in quotes because it was really just, hyperbolic. You know the story of lily pads? Let me tell you that one real quick. Imagine you live on a giant pond in a little house, and across the pond somewhere, you can't even see there's a lily pad. And overnight, the lily pad doubles to 2. The next night, it doubles to 4. It goes on and on and on like this, and in 100 days, the lake is full. But you don't see that it's filling until day 98 or day 99, okay? That's how hyperbolic works, right? It springs out on you. That's what happened a few years ago with these, when OpenAI released that first, Gen AI model. They said, look, it's not ready, it has bias, it hallucinates, heck. And they released it. And then 8 other companies were like, oh, we have one too, let's go. So we all reacted to it very quickly. The first thing that everybody did was say, look, we're, put AI on our name, put AI in the name of our product, put a chatbot using an LLM in whatever product that you have. We're all AI enabled now, okay? And then we started getting good at it, right? It says it's not about just the LLM, it's about retrieval augmented generation, so RAG. Everyone's gonna do RAG, let's release RAG Studios. Everybody did that. And then we said, okay, it's still not good enough, everyone's gonna need agents, so everyone goes and does that. And in the context of all that going on, all the business users were in the same place. They were like, nobody cares anymore that we're in year 7 of our 3-year journey to the cloud. We got to go with what we have now. So let's make this thing happen. It's in the context of all that Cloudera has been building its AI solution. We did an acqui-hire year before last while this was going on of a company called Verta and brought in some significant expertise in the space. And they've helped lead us to a place where, frankly, we think we have the best solution out there for high code, Jupyter Notebook connected directly into the system to do this stuff. Those guys don't want your agents. They don't want your anything because theirs is going to be better than yours, all the way to no code. So, drag and drop and plain language and et cetera. And this set of studios, frankly, is right at the leading edge of the things that can be done productized out in the marketplace. So that's what you guys were looking at.
Cool. And I think the no-code bit's quite important for you, isn't it, Alicia? Because you're again talking about having limited resources.
Yeah, I mean, and in particular, sort of technical resources, right? Like our business is humanitarian aid, so there's not a lot of resources for IT or technology, what we would call technology for development, which is more focused on our humanitarian programming. So our T4D team is 2 people. So our ability to kind of both build and manage systems is pretty limited. So the ability to go and use sort of a low-code solution, even if we don't necessarily have to, even if we have the skill set to use a high-code solution, it does save time. It does help us retain some of our human resources for other things, like onboarding people into the system, building up the usage of the system itself and the adoption of the system itself out in the field, which is arguably kind of the more important role that we play. Right. And so I think that sort of diversity of the Cloudera solution has been really beneficial to us, where ultimately we can choose to go to your high code solution if we decide we need to, but for the moment, we're doing what we can with the drag and drop because that's all we really have time for.
That's right. Do you want to show the solution? Do we have yeah, there it is.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things I noticed, because I mentioned at the start that Rob had to stop work quite suddenly, so we had to hand over the work that he was doing to somebody else in my team. And professional services team, my team were all mostly busy. I had one guy in the team, he'd never worked with Agent Studio before, just because he works on other parts of our stack, but he was available. But it was great because he was able to pick up the work that Rob did and get it deployed in Agent Studio. He had to build a couple more MCP servers and get them deployed. And he was, he's a smart guy because he's a professional services guy, but even so, he was able to sort of pick it up in a couple of days, and the interface makes that easy. So our hope is that when we've kind of completed the first phase of the project, we can hand over the solution to Alicia and her team, and they will easily be able to pick up and run with it and develop it further.
And one of the things that Cloudera did was connect all the products that we have. So we have a whole lot of products for ingestion and for storage and for et cetera, whether it's our data engineering stuff or our data warehousing stuff, our flow stuff using all of our streaming. We set all those up as agents inside the Agent Studio. So you're starting off with a whole set of capabilities as you continue to build agents to create some pretty elegant solutions very quickly.
Yeah, no, it's been pretty quick to get those agents built. And as I said, we've kind of mentioned it already, but the beauty of using the agentic workflows is that for each of the, and we'll see it in a minute, we'll talk a little bit about the front end a bit more, but you'll see that the information that the AI produces comes back kind of categorized into these different themes that we talked about, and each of those themes and these cards that you'll see on the next slide are driven by an agentic workflow. So we've got, as I say, we'll have, by the end of the solution, we'll have a whole bunch of agents all running.
I talk about technology a lot, but when I was talking with Alicia about what she's facing, and I'm thinking, oh, here's a solution, here's a solution, here's a solution. Like, all we were talking about was how you get people to use it. I mean, you're talking about how many countries?
35 plus.
And how many languages?
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. So just the concept of getting people to understand what it is, trust it, be able to use it, that was not something that, honestly, I spend as much time thinking about, so that was very enlightening to me.
Yeah, so adoption is really sort of the key to success in any technology product or project, right? And so for us at MercyCORE, our objective is really to create some of these tools that people will actually be putting to use. If you create something that then sits there with no users, then you're not realizing the ROI that London Business School so kindly calculated for us, right? And there's really no point to it. It's not saving you money, it's just costing you money in the long run. In the short run, really. And so really it's about how do we engage with our users to determine what their workflows are so that the platform fits into that workflow. And they're very clear about what they want from it. Sometimes it doesn't always translate directly to technical capability, or they don't express it until they see it on the screen and they realize that's not actually what my workflow is. But they have very clear ideas about what they want out of a platform. Al mentioned, we have had analysts try to use sort of publicly available LLM type platforms, and they have a lot of opinions, right? And one of those opinions is that the data that gets surfaced is often whatever's sponsored by a corporate sponsor underneath the hood, right? It's the same if you go to a search engine, usually it's whoever's paying for those top line resources, that's what comes to the top of your search. Or it can be based on frequency. What are the resources people are going to most often? That does not make them the most accurate resources, right? And so very often what's surfaced through those public tools is not what analysts want to see. And they're very clear about wanting to be able to plug their own resources in, to look across those resources, for those resources to be organized thematically to support their report writing process. But they're also very clear they want kind of like to stop at a certain point because this is not designed to replace analysts. You can't replace the sort of nuanced contextual information that somebody who's living and breathing the humanitarian world has, right? When you're sitting in that country and you're doing key informant interviews and you're combining all this information together, that's when real insights happen. And that platform is probably never going to get to that point. So we want to be clear on what the platform can do and can't do, and we want the workflows to support that. And all of that has to be really hashed out in an iterative process. We have to tell Rob to do one thing and then probably tell him to undo it the next week because you've got to kind of like work through these things. But if it doesn't support that workflow, then there's no actual confidence in the platform. And so really, I think like we've worked really closely with Al and Rob to get that workflow sort of in a way that adoption is going to happen naturally because it's a tool the users have designed themselves. And that's been a really important part of our collaboration. And it's the thing that we think about the most, is less about the technical build and more about the adoption, how people are going to trust the platform, making sure that it fits into our workflows so that the sustainment of the platform makes sense in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, I was overwhelmed by some of the things that you were saying. Simple example, is you guys have to rely on what's happening in social media for a sense of what's going on in the country, what's going on the ground, latest stuff, and then you run into disinformation, right? So if you've got an LLM out trying to do that for you, it's not going to know the difference.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty daunting stuff, and the ability to tell an agent what sources to trust and et cetera. I mean, that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is in particular Democratic Republic of the Congo. Unfortunately, there's a lot of violence against NGOs, specifically because there's a lot of rumors on social media and on the internet. And so what our team does there is looks at both social media as well as traditional media sources, triangulates those things, and is able to kind of then combat some of that misinformation, make it safer for implementation, and also identify when it's not safe to do humanitarian implementation. But that's a lot of sources to go after at one time, and collecting that all in one place, enabling them to scan across sort of all of those different resources is something that's really powerful in terms of time saving and their ability to spend their time on analysis versus information gathering.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
And I was going to say, it's something that I think we've been learning really quickly through this process is actually getting the right data sources for each of the different themes and then understanding the nuances between those data sources and how that might change, and how, ultimately we're not there yet, but a scenario where the analyst can maybe add more data sources into themselves dynamically, so that if there's new data sources that comes along, or they hear something on a social media feed that they weren't using previously, they can bring those in as well. So it's a very dynamic situation, and trying to understand, as I say, get the way that the system brings the data back to the users in a way that they can interact and understand. And we don't want it, for example, to over summarize some of the stuff, because they need to see more of the, like you said, more of the detail, so that they can then actually understand what that means and triangulate the various different sources. So it's going to be an ongoing journey. But I think they've engaged really well with it so far, haven't they? We've had some good feedback already from them.
Yeah, we have, both good and bad.
Yeah.
But we've had a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
And we'll get there eventually. But I think it just emphasizes sort of, the flexibility of the platform on the back end, that we're able to kind of craft those agents in a way where they're pretty easily configurable. And then also that sort of user-centered design process that we've been using. I think those two pieces are really highlighting how this project is going to ultimately be a success.
Cool. And essentially, the flow is fairly straightforward, really, is because the analyst will know what they want to do initially. They'll know what questions they want to ask, what information they're after. So they just need to select their region first, and then it'll bring back everything related to all the different themes, and then they can start to drill down into the area that they're interested in. They can then have a natural language conversation with the agent to ask it more specific questions. So it's kind of I kind of see it as a big funnel, and it's just slowly kind of refining down the information, and they can just get it to a point where it's where they need to either lift and shift it into their report, or kind of do more analysis on specific bits and then add their own conclusions from the data. So it's really just a 3-step flow to kind of help them, say, triangulate and narrow down. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
Yep.
So I think we're kind of looking to the future now a bit now.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about where we're going from here. This fun slide is so we can start talking about where we believe the world is going. All right. When we think about the big data, right, term from 15 years ago, we think of the first era of big data being from 15 years ago to about 7 or 8 years ago, and then we call that the era of control. And it was exactly that: control of cost, control of process, control of a number of things, and getting control of large amounts of data for the first time, when back then we were talking about terabytes. Then we get into the next era from 7 or 8 years ago until now. And that second era we call the era of convenience, right? It was about ease of use. It was about getting quickly to some value and not going through the old IT processes of the old days. And with convenience came at least some loss of control. You couldn't do some of the things you wanted to the way you wanted to do them. You had to do them the way they were out of the box. You lost control of some of the processes and some of the costs. And we believe that the world is now coming to an era of convergence where those two things have to be true, right? And in order to do that, you have to be able to, number one, the cloud experience is what the world expects from all of its stuff now, right? I want a SaaS or a SaaS adjacent like software product. I want it to be easy to use. I don't want to think about where stuff is. It just magically happens out there. So that cloud experience has to be delivered. It has to be consistent, and it has to be consistent across each of the public clouds and across private clouds, air-gapped environments, data centers. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is you have to be able to do all of that in such a way that you can get to value in minutes. Never mind months or weeks, in minutes. Okay, and we're achieving that with something that we're calling Anywhere Cloud. All right, we've done a series of acquisitions over the past year. I mentioned our acquisition of the AI company, but we also acquired a company called Octopi, which is for deep data lineage and cataloging. And we acquired a company called Tyken. And Tyken is a full Kubernetes container system, but it's also a environment management system. And we're putting that together with the data servers that we had in this Anywhere Cloud. In Q1, it's in tech preview, and in Q2, it releases GA. And it is the first ever data platform for doing AI, but it's a disaggregated platform because each of these services that's fully containerized has a unified data fabric inside it, so they all work together, they all talk to one another, but they deploy independently. And they deploy in minutes from an interface. And that is, we believe, going to be game-changing for what people need to do, because more and more, it's a complex data state of lots of different vendors in lots of different places. You're not moving your data around anymore. You've got to be able to do this stuff on the edge. You've got to be able to do it everywhere. And we think this is the first platform that the world has ever seen that's going to be able to do that. And I like that because when I look at the use cases that you have, and I mean, you guys are literally all over the world. Literally all over the world, having to do things in environments that are just blow me away, right? And the things that we're going to be able to do for organizations that have such a complex task, I think is very, very exciting.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting, Leo, because the sort of multi-cloud conversation amongst INGOs has been going on for a number of years now. Mm-hmm. We are across all of those clouds, and then we also have a super challenging regulatory environment. Yep. We have places where you can't move data outside the country. It needs to be on data centers inside those borders and so on. So I think things like that are kind of necessary for the type of work that we do, for the type of diversity that we have across our organization.
I can only imagine, right? You guys hear the whole sovereign cloud conversation, yeah? You might have heard that. But the fact that you're in all those different countries, when each of those countries has a different rule on sovereignty, that's mind-boggling.
Well, and the rules about AI are changing as well. The regulatory environment around AI specifically will change as well. So the governance around those tools is going to be evolving rapidly over the next few years, and we'll have to be keeping an eye on those things as well. And so, so those types of products, I think, are really exciting to see those starting to actually come out and available generally.
Yeah. Look, we're coming to the end of our prepared remarks. We do have two microphones wandering around in the back or walking down the center aisle. If anybody wants to ask any questions before we let you go. Please, come on.
The mic's just coming.
Here it comes. There we go.
Hi, I was wondering, do you guys have a particular use case or a story of where someone on your team has used this and it's made a difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as Al mentioned, our development process was interrupted a bit by the arrival of a charming new baby boy. So we're not in a position where we've completed as much as we wanted to by today. But there is currently an effort to start using the platform to develop some reporting for Sudan. So our Sudan crisis analysis team is a single analyst. So he does not have a lot of bandwidth to get done what he wants to do. The Sudan context is extremely dynamic, extremely volatile. It's also extremely fragmented. So there's a lot of different actors in many different places doing a lot of different things. So they experience some pretty severe data silos, information silos. There's no sort of unified information platform across that humanitarian effort, right? So everybody's doing their own thing. So there's a huge risk of duplication of effort. There's a huge risk of resource waste in that context. So what MercyCORE is planning to do is to look at a report that we've been wanting to do for many months, have not had the bandwidth for that analyst to do. It's going to look at food security across Sudan, both how to evaluate current food security situation as well as be forward-looking and preventing food security problems moving forward. And so that is sort of our goal, is to release a report on that topic, hopefully in the next 4 to 6 weeks. But yeah, sorry about that. We had planned to have a product done but unfortunately, you can't always account for life. We know that in the humanitarian world. So, yeah.
Cool. And can I just say, please do support these guys. I've worked with Alicia and her team for 18 months now, and it's humbling working with them. They're amazing people doing amazing work. The ideas that Alicia has to really innovate with technology are phenomenal. But the whole team are I'm always humbled and inspired by the way that the MercyCORE team go about their work, in difficult, challenging circumstances, and it's an absolute pleasure and a privilege to work with them. So yeah, please do support the team as much as you can.
So just so you know, when you're working with an Alicia and an Alistair, and they both go by Al, and when you type Al, it looks like AI, it's impossible to write an email. So anyway, Alicia, Alistair, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.